Headlights sweep an empty lot, then cut to black. A hand rests on a door that hasn't opened in 15 years. Not yet. Closer than anyone inside that building understands. Above it, a sun flickers once then holds amber and green. Burning like it doesn't know yet what's coming, 3 strangers are already writing about a place they've never known. 12 minutes apart, like they're building a case. One of them knows too much. Names a locked box that was never supposed to leave one family's kitchen. Somewhere close, a phone buzzes face down on a table, and nobody's watching it yet. Something's been circling this place for 2 months, learning its rhythms, waiting on a debt 15 years old to finally come due. Across the street in the dark, someone stares up at that sign like it still owes him something. Not asking permission anymore. Footsteps start, slow, deliberate. The door doesn't open. Not yet. The box smells like cinnamon and dust, and something underneath both of those that Elias still hasn't found a word for. Not in 15 years. Something that is just her. 3 days until the anniversary. He keeps forgetting, then remembering, then forgetting again, which is its own particular kind of grief if you think about it too hard. He doesn't think about it. Not directly. Not yet. He sits at the kitchen table, with the box open in front of him, like it might say something if he waits long enough. It's tin, not wood. Rusted a little at the corners. Odessa Whitfield's name isn't written on it anywhere. She never needed to label what was already hers, but everybody who ever ate at her table knew exactly which drawer it lived in, and exactly which hand was allowed to open it. Hers. Only hers. Until it wasn't anymore. He lifts out a card. Peach cobbler. The corner has gone soft, almost see-through, worn down by 30 years of buttered fingers reaching for it in a hurry. Her handwriting slants right, like it's always leaning toward the next word, before it's finished with this one. Don't rush the batter, she wrote once in the margin next to nothing in particular. It knows when you're rushing. He huffs a little. Not quite a laugh. Next card. Smothered pork chops. Somewhere along the way, she'd crossed out a 3 and written a 2 above it in different ink a decade apart. Probably the recipe still learning things about itself even after 40 years of being made the same way. Which is the kind of detail that undoes him a little, if he lets it. He remembers the first plate he ever brought her in a hospital room that smelled like nothing at all, the specific sterile nothing. Hospitals build a whole industry around, like they're afraid of what a real smell might remind a person of. He'd wrapped it in foil still warm, snuck it past a nurse who pretended not to notice. She was smaller by then. Smaller than a woman who'd spent her whole life filling every doorway she walked through. But she unwrapped that foil like it was Christmas morning and closed her eyes at the first bite and said, "Well, look at you." 4 words. That's all. He spent 15 years trying to earn them a second time. I was 22, the last time he watched her cook anything. 23 when she stopped being able to. And somewhere in between those 2 ages, watching the strongest woman he'd ever known get smaller by the week. He did the only thing that made sense to a broke kid with too many feelings and not enough money. He built a smoker, not bought, built, out of an old oil drum and a stubbornness he didn't know he had in the backyard of a rented house that wasn't even his. $200, most of it borrowed, none of it paid back on any schedule anyone would call responsible. He started selling plates on weekends, just to neighbors at first, just to have something to carry into that room that smelled like her kitchen, instead of somebody else's disinfectant. She never got to taste a plate that came off a real smoker in a real restaurant with her name over the door. That part he doesn't let himself think about either, except that he just did. Which is how grief works, he's learned. You build a wall, and it holds for months, and then one Tuesday in October, a recipe card with a crossed-out 3 knocks the whole thing down. One more card. Biscuits, this time the recipe barely visible under a coffee ring shaped like a moon. This one pulls up a different memory, entirely him maybe 9 years old, sitting at that same kitchen table, doing homework. He wasn't really doing when a man he'd never seen before knocked on the screen door and asked real quiet if there was any way he could get something to eat. Didn't have money. Said so plainly like he expected the door to close on him for saying it. Odessa didn't even pause. Fixed him a plate like she'd been expecting him all week. Sat him right down at that table across from a 9-year-old with a math worksheet and talked to him like he was somebody's uncle, just getting in from out of town. Later, after the man left with a to-go plate and a paper sack of biscuits for the road, young Elias asked her why she'd done all that for a stranger who couldn't pay. She didn't even look up from the dishes. Folks aren't broken, baby. Just overlooked. There's a difference, and most people never bother learning it. He was 9. He didn't understand it then. He understands it now the way you understand a bruise because you keep pressing on it on purpose just to see if it still hurts. You can't plant a garden and forget to water it, baby. She said that about everything. Marriages, friendships, the choir, when half of it stopped showing up to practice. Him, more than once, back when he thought a garden was just a garden. He built her a restaurant instead of a headstone. A headstone is a place you visit. A restaurant is a place that keeps needing you. Some stubborn, grieving 23-year-old part of him decided that was the better memorial, the kind that has to be tended, that can't just sit still and be beautiful. It has to be fed every day, or it starts dying a little the way everything does when nobody's watering it. He hasn't been watering it, not the way he used to. That thought arrives uninvited, and he sits with it longer than he means to the recipe card, still between 2 fingers, gone soft now from his own thumb instead of hers. His phone buzzes on the table. He doesn't look at it. He's not a look-at-the-phone kind of owner, not about the restaurant, never has been. Not since the early years when every review felt like a referendum on whether she'd be proud of him. He made himself stop reading them. Felt healthier. Otis handles all that now, or says he does, or Elias assumes he does, which is maybe the whole problem in 4 words he's never said out loud to anyone. The phone buzzes again. He looks. 3 new reviews. Not unusual on its own. People eat, people have opinions. That's the whole business. Except something about the timestamps catches him. All 3 12 minutes apart. Like somebody sat down and wrote them in a single sitting. Like somebody had a list. The first one's easy to shrug off. Used to be my favorite spot. Not anymore. Sat at the counter 15 minutes before anyone even looked at me. He winces, files it under bad night, tells himself every restaurant has bad nights. The second one's harder to shrug. Save your money. Whoever's running this place doesn't care if it survives. Won't be sad when it's gone. He reads it twice. There's something almost personal in the phrasing, not angry, the way a bad meal review is angry but tired. Like the person writing it has been disappointed by him specifically, not just by a plate of food. He tells himself it's nothing. People say things like that about restaurants all the time. It's not about him. It can't be about him. Nobody who eats there even knows his face anymore. That's the whole point of building something and stepping back and trusting people to run it right. Which is when he sees the third one. No photo. No name. Just 3 lines sitting there in the same gray text as everything else, looking exactly as ordinary as a receipt. Ask him what's really in that tin box from his grandmother's kitchen. Family recipes, or promises he never bothered to keep. He doesn't move. The recipe card is still between his fingers. The kitchen is still quiet, still smelling like cinnamon and dust and her. Nothing in the room has changed at all, except that his stomach has dropped straight through the floor, and he can't for the life of him remember how to swallow. Because that box isn't at the restaurant. It's never been at the restaurant. It sat in his mother's attic for a decade, and in his own house for the last 5 years. In a drawer he doesn't open in front of anyone in a kitchen no customer has ever set foot in. Nobody knows about this box, nobody except family. He reads it again, then again, waiting for it to mean something less than what it means. Except it doesn't stop meaning it, no matter how many times he reads it. And somewhere around the 4th read, he realizes his hand is shaking just a little. The recipe card trembling like a leaf that hasn't figured out it's supposed to fall yet. He almost calls Otis. Gets as far as pulling up the name thumb, hovering right over the call button 3 separate times. Doesn't press it. What would he even say? Somebody knows about Grandma's box. Does that sound insane to you too? And besides some small, stubborn 23-year-old part of him, doesn't want to hand this off to anybody yet. Not until he understands it himself. Not until he knows whether it's a stranger with a grudge or something closer. Something with a name he might actually recognize. He sets the phone face down on the table. Which doesn't help. It's still there underneath, glowing at nothing, saying the same 3 lines to an empty kitchen, whether he's looking at it or not. So he does the thing he almost never does anymore. He goes back to the restaurant in his head, not the version Otis gives him over the phone in careful, reassuring sentences, but the real one. The one with actual people standing at actual counters, saying actual things when they think nobody who matters is listening. A Tuesday lunch rush, the smell of the grill. Somebody's bad attitude nobody's bothered to correct because he hasn't been in the room in longer than he'd like to admit out loud. I doesn't know what he'll find. That's the truth of it, underneath all the trying not to panic. He built something to keep her alive in the only way a person can be kept alive once they're gone, and for 3 days a year, he remembers to be afraid he's letting it die anyway. Quietly. One uncorrected, bad Tuesday at a time, 3 days until the anniversary. He looks down at the box, at the cards he still hasn't gotten through tonight, at the ones near the bottom he hasn't touched in years, if he's honest. There's more in there than recipes. There's always been more in there than recipes. He knows that the way you know something you've decided not to know yet. Not tonight, though. Tonight there's somewhere else he needs to be. He closes the box gentle, the way you'd close a door on a room where somebody's finally fallen asleep. Then he stands, and he doesn't feel like a man who owns 3 grills, 40 employees, and a restaurant called Odessa's Table, with his grandmother's name over the door. Upstairs in the back of his closet, there's a hoodie he hasn't worn since before the restaurant had a name, and a pair of jeans with a tear starting at the knee. He never bothered to fix because some part of him always knew he'd need them again someday. He pulls them on standing in the dark, not bothering with the light. Laces a pair of boots that have gone soft and gray with disuse. Catches himself for just a second in the hallway mirror and doesn't recognize the man looking back. Which is the whole point. I didn't think someday would come wearing a stranger's handwriting and knowing about a locked box nobody's supposed to know about. But it has. And he is not the kind of man who waters a garden from a distance. Not anymore. That same afternoon, the sign looks smaller from across the street than it does in his memory. Everything does eventually. The house he grew up in, the church pew he used to swing his legs from the woman who filled up both of them just by walking in. But the sign is exactly the size he remembers. Amber and green buzzing faintly against the gray afternoon, spelling out Odessa's Table. A promise he isn't sure the building underneath it is still keeping. He doesn't park out front. Parks half a block down, next to a hydrant in the kind of spot that gets you a ticket if anybody's watching. Except today, he wants to be the kind of man nobody's watching. He cuts the engine and sits there a second too long, hands still on the wheel, like he's driving somewhere in his head, even though the car isn't moving anymore. 12 months. That's how long it's been since he walked through that door as a customer instead of an owner. He didn't plan it that way. Nobody plans neglect. It just happens in small increments. One skipped visit becomes 2, becomes a season, becomes a version of yourself you don't recognize in a hallway mirror. He gets out, adjusts the cap low over his eyes, a plain gray thing he bought years ago and never wears, and starts walking. The smell hits him before the door does. Smoked meat and sweet cornbread, and something sharp underneath barbecue sauce, sugar, and vinegar, fighting each other in the best possible way. It's a smell that used to mean home to him before it meant business, before he learned every ingredient's cost per pound and every supplier's delivery schedule. For one dizzy second, walking through that door, it means home again. He almost forgets why he's here. Then he sees the dining room, and he remembers exactly why. There's a table by the window, with 3 plates still stacked on it. Syrup crusted along the rim. Nobody's cleared it in what looks like 20 minutes. A little girl's crayon rolled halfway across the floor, and nobody's picked it up either, though 4 different people have stepped over it since he walked in. The music's too loud for the room, some country station bleeding through the speakers, at a volume that makes conversation an effort, and underneath it, the particular quiet of a restaurant, where the people working it have stopped talking to each other about anything that matters. He gets in line behind 2 men in work boots. Waits. Just watch, he tells himself. Don't fix anything today. Just watch. It's harder than it sounds standing in his own restaurant, with his hands doing nothing, his mouth doing nothing. Every instinct in him wanting to walk into that kitchen and ask why there's a stack of dirty plates within arm's reach of a family with a toddler. The line moves. Slowly. 2 registers, but only one of them's actually working, a young man, with his elbows on the counter, and a phone half hidden below the register's edge thumb, moving fast eyes flicking up just often enough to make it look like he's paying attention. His name tag says Corey. Next to him, a young woman is popping gum loud enough to hear over the radio, ringing people up like she's doing them a favor by acknowledging their existence at all. Elias watches Corey's phone a second longer than he means to. There's something about the way the kid keeps checking it. Not scrolling, not bored, scrolling. The way people do when a shift's dragging. Reading something. Reading it again. Like whatever's on that screen matters more to him than the 6 people standing in this line. Everybody's got somewhere else they'd rather be, Elias thinks. Except I built this, so nobody would have to. Next, that's Corey, not looking up. Elias steps forward. Doesn't say anything about the name tag, doesn't say anything about the phone, just orders. Brisket plate, side of greens. Keeps his voice flat. Southern but flat, nothing in it that would sound like a man who signs the checks. That's it. Corey taps it in without once looking at his face. Says the total. Elias pays cash, exact change the way he used to when he was 22, and counting every dollar like it owed him something. Steps to the side. Waits. And that's when it starts. You see that one? Corey says it low, but not low enough for a man standing 8 feet away with nothing else to listen to. Another walk-in. Probably won't tip. They never do, the girl says. Simone according to her tag. Though Elias doesn't clock the name until later, replaying this moment in his head like a bruise he can't stop pressing. Not since they started letting anybody in here. Anybody. Elias goes very still. The word lands somewhere under his ribs and just sits there. "You mean the program," Corey says, and there's a laugh folded into it, small and ugly. "Come on. Ever since they started hiring off that list, the shelter thing, whatever it's called. This place has gone straight downhill. I'm just saying what everybody's thinking." "Real talk," Simone says. "You know the owner's some rich guy, right? Black dude got his little picture on the wall by the register, like we're supposed to feel something about it. Meanwhile, we're back here doing everything, and he's off somewhere sipping something green out of a jar, not even checking on us." "Bet he don't know half the people he hired," Corey says. "Bet if you asked him Otis's last name, he'd have to look it up." They both laugh at that. It isn't a mean laugh, not exactly. It's worse than mean. It's comfortable. The kind of laugh that means this isn't the first time they've said it. Means it's a bit they've got worn smooth from repetition, something they reach for whenever the shift drags. Elias doesn't move. Doesn't trust his own face right now, standing in a room full of strangers, wearing a stranger's clothes, listening to two kids. He hired kids whose paychecks have his signature on them. Whether he signs them by hand or not, talk about him like a rumor. Like a ghost story somebody tells to explain why the milk's gone bad. He should be furious. Some part of him is. But underneath the fury, there's something colder. Something that settles into his chest and just stays there. Patient, the way disappointment does when it's finally found a place to land. This was supposed to be the one place in the world where nobody had to prove they belonged. He looks around the room while he waits, because looking at Corey and Simone any longer feels like it might crack something open in his face that he can't afford to show. An older man by the window is frowning down at a glass of tea, like it personally wronged him. A young mother's bouncing a toddler on her knee, glancing every few seconds toward a server station where nobody's stationed her food long gone cold, if it's even come out yet. There's no laughter in the room, no warmth, just the low hum of people eating quickly so they can leave. Odessa wouldn't recognize this place. That thought does something to him that Corey's laugh couldn't. Cracks him open faster than an insult ever could, because an insult he could argue with, and grief he can only stand inside of. His number gets called. He doesn't move for it. He walks up to the counter instead, and Corey looks at him. Actually looks this time mild irritation at the delay, and Elias says, "Actually, cancel that." "You sure?" Corey's already reaching for the void button, not even curious. "Yeah." His voice comes out steadier than he expects, which surprises him more than anything else that's happened in the last 10 minutes. "Lost my appetite." He walks out. Doesn't look back at the counter, doesn't look at the older man's frown, or the toddler on the young mother's knee, just pushes through the door into afternoon air that feels 10 degrees cooler than it did 20 minutes ago, though the temperature hasn't changed at all. Only he has. He sits in the car without starting it. Hands on the wheel again, except now there's nowhere to drive that would actually take him away from what he just heard. His fingers start up a slow rhythm against the dash, tapping out nothing in particular, the kind of habit that shows up in his hands whenever his head's too full to sit still. Bet he don't know half the people he hired. He knows every one of them. New past tense is starting to feel more accurate by the minute. Knew their names when he hired them himself, sat across from every single one, at a folding table in the back, asked them what they needed, instead of just what they could do. Somewhere between then and now, knowing turned into used to know, and he can't find the exact day it happened, which is its own kind of horror. Grief you can point to a date for. This is worse. This just drifted. 10 minutes pass. Then 15. He doesn't cry exactly, just sits with his jaw tight and his eyes stinging in that specific way that isn't quite tears. Yet might not ever get there, might just sit behind his eyes like weather that won't break. He thinks about driving straight home, thinks about it hard enough that his hand actually moves toward the key. Except he didn't come this far to leave with half the picture. He gets out instead, walks down to the gas station on the corner, buys a coffee. He doesn't especially want just to have something to do with his hands that isn't shaking. Then he circles back, not through the front, not past Corey and Simone, and whatever bit they've got queued up next, but around down the side street toward the alley that runs behind the building. He knows this alley. Knows it the way you know the back of a house you grew up visiting, better than the front, honestly, because the front is for company, and the back is for family. No cameras out here. Just a dumpster, a beat-up steel door, where the cooks take their smoke breaks, and above it, cracked open 3 inches against the heat of the kitchen. A window he used to climb through as a kid before anybody thought to give him a key. He stands beneath it, listens. There's a laugh first. Deep, easy, unmistakable Otis's laugh, the one that used to fill up whatever room it was in back when Otis first came through the door, with nothing but a halfway house recommendation and a willingness to work harder than anybody Elias had ever met. Elias remembers hiring him, remembers the way Otis's hands shook a little, signing the paperwork like he expected the offer to get pulled back any second. That man doesn't sound like he's shaking now. Telling you. Otis is saying, voice carrying easy through the window. He ain't coming back. And if he does, he'll walk in here all fancy, acting like he invented gumbo his own self. More laughing. Corey's voice closer to the window now. Mr. Ghost Boss. That's what I call him. Got his little picture on the wall, don't show his face. What kind of boss runs a place like that? Simone adds, and Elias hears the shrug in it, even without seeing her. Then a chair scrapes. And Otis's voice changes, drops, the easy laugh goes low and steady, in a way that makes the hair on Elias's arms stand up even before he understands why. Y'all know he started this place with $200 and a smoker. He built himself out in a rented backyard hut. Silence. So, Corey, eventually. Trying to sound unbothered, not quite managing it. So watch your mouth, Otis says. This ain't just a job for some of us. Some of us remember what this place used to mean, before it was a place at all, before there was a menu, before there was a sign. It was a man in a driveway, with a stubborn streak and a broke heart trying to keep somebody's memory fed. Elias's throat closes. He didn't expect to hear his own history handed back to him through a cracked window in Otis's voice, instead of his own more accurate than he could have told it himself. Relax, Corey says, and there's an edge in it now, something defensive dressing itself up as casual. You act like the man died. I'm just saying if he don't care enough to show up. Why should the rest of us care more than we have to? Some of us got people who actually check on us, actually show up. Don't need a boss for that. Some of us got people who actually check on us. Elias goes cold all over, standing in that alley with a coffee cooling in his hand. Because that's not the sound of a bored kid running his mouth. That's the sound of a kid who's got somebody in his corner, somebody real enough, present enough, that it's made him bold, made him feel like he doesn't need to answer to anyone who isn't that somebody. Who? The word sits in his chest, sharp and specific. Who's checking on him? And why does it sound like a threat instead of a comfort? He almost misses what Otis says next. He's so busy chewing on that. Keep talking like that. Otis says quiet, now quiet, in the way that's more dangerous than shouting ever could be. And you'll find out real quick why folks don't stick around a place that doesn't respect them back. Respect goes both ways, Corey. Always has. Nobody answers that. For a long moment, there's just the clatter of a kitchen working through a slow patch, a pan set down too hard. Water running somebody's boots against tile. Then softer, almost like Otis is talking to himself. Been seeing somebody hanging around out front lately, too. Evenings mostly after we close. Just standing there looking up at that sign, like he's trying to remember something. Don't know him. But he looks at this place like he used to belong to it. For a second, Elias forgets how to breathe. Like he used to belong to it. There's 100 ways that sentence could mean nothing. An old regular. A contractor scouting the block. Somebody's ex waiting on somebody who works the closing shift. He runs through every ordinary explanation his mind can build fast, almost frantic, the way you talk yourself down from something, before you've even confirmed there's something to talk yourself down from. Except none of them stick. Because used to belong to, it isn't a stranger's phrase. It's a family phrase. And the only family this restaurant has left standing is the man crouched under a kitchen window right now holding a coffee. He forgot he was drinking, trying to remember how to breathe normal. He doesn't wait to hear anything else. Doesn't trust himself to. He backs away from the window, slow, careful, with his feet on the gravel, and doesn't let himself run until he's clear of the alley. Back at the car, hands shaking enough now that it takes him 2 tries to get the key in. He sits there. Doesn't drive. Just sits, coffee forgotten in the cup holder, staring at nothing through the windshield. Odessa. What did I miss? What is it I'm not seeing? Her voice comes to him the way it always does when he's got no defenses left to keep it out. Not a exactly. More like a habit. His mind's worn into itself over 15 years of missing her. You can't plant a garden and forget to water it, baby. Don't matter how good the seeds are. I used to think that was about people. About marriages, about the choir, when half of it stopped showing up to practice about him more than once. Back when he thought a garden was just a garden and not a metaphor. She was handing him early on purpose, so he'd have it ready when he needed it. He needs it now. And it isn't just the staff she was talking about. It's everything he's let go untended, the reviews. He stopped reading the register. He stopped checking whatever thread's been quietly unraveling behind that building, while he told himself distance was the same thing as trust. Somebody's out there watching this place like it's his. And I don't know who. He pulls out his phone. Doesn't call anybody. Not yet, not Otis. Not with his voice still unsteady, and his thoughts still half a step behind whatever's actually happening. Instead, he opens a new message, types the same 11 words 3 different ways before he settles on the version that sounds least like panic and most like the man whose name is on the lease. Team meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Attendance required. No exceptions. No emoji, no explanation. Just enough to make every phone in that building buzz once hard, and every person reading it wonder exactly how much trouble they might be in. He sends it, sets the phone face down on the passenger seat the same way he set it, face down on his kitchen table the night before. Like distance from the screen might somehow put distance between himself and everything it's carrying. It doesn't work this time either. He starts the car. Doesn't drive home. Can't, not yet, not with his hands still not fully steady, and his head 3 different kinds of loud. Drives instead toward the motel out past the highway, the plain one, with the flickering vacancy sign. The kind of place nobody would think to look for the man whose name sits over a restaurant's front door. He checks in under his own name. Nobody blinks. That's its own quiet, bitter joke, how easy it is to disappear when nobody's looking for you in the first place. In the room, he sits at a small round table with a legal pad he bought at the gas station, and he writes down everything he can remember, word for word, before the alley starts to blur, the way memories do once you stop being inside them. Ghost boss. Some of us got people who actually check on us. Been seeing somebody hanging around out front evenings, mostly, like he used to belong to it. He underlines that last part twice, then sits back and looks at it a long time, the pen loose in his fingers, the window unit rattling somewhere behind him, like it's trying to fill a silence he doesn't especially want filled. Tomorrow he's not hiding anymore. Tomorrow the hoodie stays in the closet, and he walks through that door as exactly who he is. But tonight, in a motel room that smells like carpet cleaner instead of cinnamon, he lets himself sit with the fear underneath the anger, the one he didn't let Corey or Simone or even Otis see. Not the fear that his restaurant is falling apart, the fear that somebody already knows exactly how to put it back together. And it isn't him. 2 days until the anniversary now. He's slept maybe 3 hours, none of them the kind that actually count, more like his body, giving out from stubbornness rather than his mind ever agreeing to rest. The legal pad's still on the nightstand when he wakes. He doesn't need to read it again. He already knows every underlined word because he wrote it himself at midnight with a hand that wouldn't stay steady, like he used to belong to it. He showers fast. Doesn't reach for the gray cap this morning. Doesn't touch the ripped jeans or the faded hoodie folded on the chair. Either today he puts on what a man wears when he isn't hiding from anybody. Dark jeans. A clean button-down. Boots he hasn't broken in properly because he hasn't shown up often. Dark jeans. A clean button-down. Boots he hasn't broken in properly because he hasn't shown up often enough to need to. His reflection in the motel mirror looks more like himself than it has in 2 days, which should feel like relief. Mostly it just feels like armor. He's in the car by 7:40, parked across the street from Odessa's table by 7:52, engine off coffee, going cold in the cup holder, watching a sign that isn't lit yet, because the building underneath it isn't open yet, because nobody's supposed to be here for another hour. Except somebody already is. A pickup truck pulls into the lot at 7:58, and Otis climbs out of it. Unhurried keys already in his hand, moving like a man who's done this 10,000 mornings and expects to do 10,000 more. He lets himself in through the side door, his own key, the one Elias handed him personally years back, without a second thought, because some people you just know. Lights flick on inside one section at a time, kitchen first. That's Otis, steady as weather. Naomi's next, a little before 8:15, walking fast with her bag over one shoulder, like she's already 3 steps into her prep list before her feet catch up. Renee after her, humming something. Elias can't make out through a closed car window, but he doesn't need to hear it to know it's something with a beat, something she'll probably still be humming at noon. And then, at 8:22, earlier than anybody else, his age has any business being here, Corey's car rolls into the far corner of the lot. Doesn't park near the door. Parks out at the edge, half in the shade engine, still running for a full minute after he's already stopped moving. Elias watches him sit there. Watches him check his phone. Put it down. Pick it back up. Watches his shoulders do something small and involuntary. Not the posture of a kid who overslept. The posture of a kid rehearsing something he doesn't want to say. That's not a hangover face, Elias thinks. That's a guilty one. He gets out of his own car before he's fully decided to. Crosses the street with his hands in his pockets, unhurried on purpose, Because whatever's sitting on that kid's chest, it isn't going to come out if he walks over there, looking like a man building a case. Corey doesn't see him coming until he's almost at the window. Then he does, and something happens to his whole face. Surprise, first fast, and unguarded, and right behind it, before he can stop it, something closer to dread. Mr. Whitfield. He's out of the car, too quick, keys still jangling in his hand, like standing up straighter might undo whatever his face just did. I didn't know you were gonna be here this early. Neither did I, honestly. Elias keeps his voice easy. Keeps it low, too, no reason for this to travel across an empty parking lot. You eat breakfast yet? Corey blinks. Whatever he braced for, it wasn't that. No, sir. Me neither. A beat. Walk with me a second. Not an order. Just an offer phrased soft enough that a scared kid could still say no to it if he wanted. Corey doesn't. Falls into step beside him. Instead, hands jammed in his hoodie pocket, eyes on the pavement, like it might tell him what to say if he stares at it hard enough. They walk toward the side of the building. Toward the alley. Actually, though, Elias doesn't let himself think too hard about that particular coincidence. Doesn't let his mind wander back to where he was standing 12 hours ago, with a coffee going cold in his hand and his whole chest caving in. Melukasern. Corey starts, and it comes out fast, defensive. A kid trying to get ahead of a conversation he can already feel closing in on him. If this is about yesterday, about what you heard, or whatever, I know how it sounded. I do. I wasn't trying to. I'm not here to fire you. That stops him cold. He looks up for the first time since they started walking. I'm not, Elias says again, and means it enough that his own voice catches a little on the second word. I've got a meeting in half an hour that's going to be hard for both of us, and I promise you'll get every chance to make things right in that room. But right now, I'm not your boss. I'm just a man asking a question, and I need you to actually hear that before you answer it. Corey's jaw works. Doesn't say anything. Who's been checking on you? The question lands soft, but it lands. What? Yesterday, in the kitchen. You said somebody actually checks on you. Somebody who's not me. Elias keeps his eyes steady on him. Doesn't let the ache underneath the question show in his face, though it costs him something to keep it there. I want to know who that is. It's not. Corey stops. Starts again. It's nobody. Just somebody I talk to sometimes. Corey. Just his name. Nothing else. But there's something in the way Elias says it. Not a threat. Not even really a push. Just a kind of tired, open-handed patience that seems to do more damage to whatever wall Corey's built than any accusation could have. He didn't tell me to do anything bad. Corey says quiet, now quieter than Elias has ever heard him. It wasn't like that. Okay. He talks to me like I matter. Like what I think actually means something. You know how that feels. To have somebody ask your opinion and actually wait for the answer. His voice cracks a little on that last part, and he hates it. Elias can see him hate it, see him swallow hard against it. Nobody around here does that. Not you, not Otis, not really. He's got his own way of doing things, and either you fit into it or you don't. This guy actually asked. Elias doesn't say anything. Lets the silence do the work silence is good at. He started coming around maybe 2 months back. Corey says, finally the words spilling now faster, like once the dam cracked, there was no controlling the rest of it. Sat at the counter a few times. Real friendly. Asked about the menu, asked how long I'd worked here, stuff like that. Then one day he just told me he used to be part of this place. A long time ago. Before my time. Before it even had this name, maybe, I don't know, he didn't get real specific. Said the family that runs it now forgot about people like us. Said he understood what it was like to feel invisible in a place that's supposed to feel like home. A place that's supposed to feel like home. Elias's chest tightens at that phrase specifically, because it isn't a phrase a stranger invents on his own. It's a phrase somebody learns. Somebody's raised on. He texts you, Elias asks, careful even. Sometimes. Nothing crazy, just checking in, asking how things were going, how the reviews were looking actually. Now that I think about it, he asked about that more than once. Elias goes very still, because there it is. The thread pulling taut between two things he'd been trying not to connect out loud, the reviews. 12 minutes apart, all three of them, like somebody sat down with a list. What's his name? Corey hesitates. Actually hesitates long enough that Elias can feel his own pulse in his throat waiting. Cashiers, Corey says. Never gave me a last name. Just Cashiers. The world doesn't stop. Nothing so dramatic as that. But something in Elias's chest does some gear that's been turning quietly. His whole adult life just seizes up mid-rotation, and for one long second, he can't make his mouth do anything at all. Cassia. He knows that name. Has known it his whole life the way you know the shape of a room you were never actually allowed to walk into. Heard through doorways, half-spoken, always followed by somebody clearing their throat and changing the subject. You know him. Corey's watching his face now, alarmed, backing up half a step, like he's said something dangerous. Mr. Whitfield, give me a second. His own voice sounds far away to him, underwater almost. He puts a hand flat against the brick wall of the building. His building, his grandmother's name over the front of it, just to have something solid under his palm. That review, Elias thinks the thought arriving fast, uninvited, stacking itself on top of everything else. He didn't say, your house. He said her kitchen. Grandma's kitchen. That's not a stranger's guess. That's a memory. And that's when it starts. The rest of it. Not gently either, not the soft unspooling of the recipe cards from 3 nights ago. This comes fast, unwelcome, a flood, finding a crack it's been pressing against for years. A photograph on Odessa's mantle that used to be there, and then one day wasn't, and nobody ever said why. And he was too young to ask, and too used to not asking by the time he was old enough. His mother's voice low on the phone in the next room some evening he can't place the year of. He had his chance. Lord knows she gave him more chances than any of us would have. An aunt at a funeral, whose funeral he can't remember, just the black dress and the paper fan saying not to him, not really to anyone. She waited on that boy longer than she should have. Broke her heart clean in half waiting, and Odessa herself, near the very end in that hospital room that smelled like nothing at all, turning her face toward the window one evening and saying to no one in a voice gone thin as paper, I hope he's eating. Wherever he's got to. I hope somebody's feeding that boy. I was 22. He didn't ask who he was. Some part of him, some instinct, he's spent 15 years not examining too closely. Understood even then that it was a door nobody in the family wanted opened, least of all her. Mr. Whitfield, Corey again, closer, now real worry in his voice. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost or something. A ghost. If only it were that simple. I'm fine, Elias says, and it isn't remotely true, but he says it steady enough that Corey seems to half believe it. He straightens up off the wall. Takes a breath that doesn't fully fill his lungs the way breaths don't when your whole chest's gone tight around something. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to actually do it, not just say you will. Okay. If he texts you again anything at all, you don't answer him. Not yet. Not till I say. Corey's face does something complicated. Guilt, mostly. And underneath it something that looks almost like relief, like he's been carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down, and somebody's finally offering to take it off his hands. Is he? Did I do something? Is this bad? I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. Elias doesn't give it. Not because he's protecting himself. Because a scared 20-year-old standing in an alley doesn't need to carry the weight of a 15-year-old family wound he's never once heard the name of before this morning. You didn't do anything wrong that a real conversation can't fix, Elias says instead, and means every word of it. I'm not angry at you, Corey. I'm angry that this place got quiet enough, long enough, that a stranger's attention started feeling like more than mine ever did. That's on me. Not you. Corey doesn't answer that. Just nods jaw-tight eyes wet enough that he has to look away toward the dumpster like it's suddenly fascinating. Go on inside, Elias tells him, gentler now. Get your apron. We're gonna talk more later, all of us, and I need you in that room in 20 minutes, like everybody else. Can you do that? Yes, sir. He watches Corey walk back toward the side door, shoulders hunched, and doesn't move himself for a long moment after the door clicks shut behind him. Cassius. He says it out loud, once quiet, just to see if the shape of it in his own mouth changes anything. It doesn't. It just sits there in the morning air like it's been waiting 15 years for somebody in this family to finally say it again. He thinks about calling his mother. Gets as far as pulling the number up before he stops himself, thumb hovering. Because if he calls her right now, mid-crisis, mid-panic, she'll hear it in his voice before he says a word, and then it becomes her crisis too. And he doesn't have room in the next 20 minutes to manage two people's grief instead of one. Later, he tells himself, get through this morning first. Then you go looking for answers. Except some small, stubborn 22-year-old part of him is already looking. Already turning the name over already. Reaching backward through 15 years of careful silence. Trying to find the shape of whatever happened in the space where that name used to be spoken out loud before it wasn't anymore. The staff meeting starts at 9:04. 4 minutes late because Elias needed those 4 minutes standing in the parking lot with his eyes closed. Breathing. Putting his face back together into something that could stand in front of a room full of people and not fall apart. They're all there when he walks in. Otis by the pass arms crossed unreadable. Naomi and Renee near the front booths. Simone in the back, sunglasses, pushed up into her hair arms, folded tight across her chest, like she already knows this isn't going to be a good morning. And Corey off to the side, not quite meeting anybody's eyes, least of all Elias's. He doesn't rush it. Lets the silence sit a second longer than's comfortable, because comfortable isn't the point today. I won't keep you long, he says, but I need you to hear me. Really hear me. Nobody moves. This place is named after my grandmother, Odessa May Whitfield. His voice doesn't waver on her name, not quite, though it costs him something to keep it that steady. She's been gone 15 years, but if you'd ever met her, you'd understand why this restaurant means more to me than 5-star reviews or a full dining room on a Friday night. Naomi's eyes soften. Renee goes still in that particular way people go still when they're about to cry and refuse to. She used to say food was just a warm hug with flavor. She fed people whether they could pay or not. Gave second chances out like they cost her nothing when they cost her everything. She believed folks weren't broken, just overlooked. He lets that word sit in the room a moment. When I built this place, I wanted it to be her kitchen at scale. Somewhere people could work and eat and belong without having to prove first that they deserved to. He looks at Corey. At Simone. Doesn't need to say anything more specific than that for the room to understand exactly what's coming. Yesterday I walked in here as a stranger. Stood right there. He points to the spot near the register, and every eye in the room follows his hand. And ordered a sandwich I never got to eat. Because I heard 2 of my own people talk about the man who built this place like he was a rumor. Like he was something to make fun of on a slow shift. Simone's jaw tightens. She doesn't look away, though. Elias gives her that much credit. I heard you call the program that gave some of you your first real shot a mistake. I heard you. I don't know the names of people whose paychecks I sign. He pauses. Lets his own voice go a little rougher, a little more honest than a boss's voice is supposed to get. That one hurt worse than the rest, if I'm being straight with you. Because I know every name. I hired every one of you myself at a folding table in the back, and I asked every single one of you what you needed, instead of just what you could do for me. He takes a breath. But I stopped showing up to prove it. And I understand now that distance doesn't read as trust. It reads as absence. That's on me. I let this place drift, and drift is how something dies slow enough that nobody notices, till it's already gone soft at the root. Nobody speaks. It's the kind of silence that has weight to it, presses down on the whole room, like humidity before a storm. So here's what changes. He pulls a folded paper from his back pocket. Doesn't need it. He's known what he was going to say since the moment he woke up 2 hours ago. But there's something steadying about holding it anyway. I'm here twice a week starting now. Real check-ins, not 5-minute hallway conversations. We're bringing back the customer comment cards, the real ones, not the internet kind anybody can fake. Somebody near the back mutters about time. Not sarcastic, almost relieved. But hear this, too. His voice hardens just slightly, just enough. If you don't want to be here, don't clock in tomorrow pretending. This isn't just a job. Not in this building. If you can't bring respect for this place, for each other, for the people walking through that door, you're free to go. No shame in that. I'd rather have 5 people who mean it than 15 who don't. Nobody walks out. Not yet. He lets the room breathe a second. Then quieter, Corey, Simone. Stick around after I want a word, just the 2 of you, whenever you're ready. Everybody else we open in 20. Let's see if this place still remembers what it's supposed to feel like. The room starts moving again, slow at first, then faster. Aprons going on chairs, scraping back into place. Elias stands near the window a moment, watching it happen, watching something in the room's temperature shift. Even if he can't yet tell whether it's shifting toward hope or just toward fear of losing a paycheck. Otis comes to stand beside him. Doesn't say anything for a long moment. Just stands there, arms still crossed, watching the same room Elias is watching. That was a good thing you just did, Otis says finally. We'll see. A pause. Otis glances at him sideways, something careful in his expression, like he's deciding whether to say the next thing at all. You look like a man who saw something out there this morning, he says. More than what happened at that counter yesterday. Elias almost lies. Almost says I'm fine again, the same worn-out 2 words he's been handing everyone all morning. But this is Otis. Otis who's been here since the beginning. Who knew him back when the smoker was still a rusted oil drum in a rented backyard, and the only staff was Elias himself, elbow deep in brisket at 5 in the morning, grieving in the only language he knew how to speak. Does the name Cashiers mean anything to you? Otis goes quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet. The full kind. The kind that means something's moving behind a man's eyes, even though his face isn't giving much away. Heard Miss Odessa say a name close to that once, he says slowly. Long time back. Before you and me ever crossed paths, most likely. She didn't say much, just said it soft the way you say a name you've said 1,000 times in your head, and maybe twice out loud. He shrugs, but it isn't a careless shrug. It's the shrug of a man being deliberately gentle with something fragile. Some names come with a look on a person's face that tells you not to ask twice. That one had that look. Elias nods slowly, doesn't trust his own voice enough to answer right away. Family, Otis asks, quiet, careful. I think so. The words come out smaller than he means them to. I think there's a whole story in this family nobody ever let me finish hearing. Otis doesn't push, just claps a hand, once warm and brief, against Elias's shoulder. The kind of gesture that says, I've got you, without needing a single extra word attached to it, and heads back toward the kitchen, leaving Elias standing alone, by the window, staring out at a parking lot that looks exactly the same as it did an hour ago. Except nothing about this morning feels the same anymore. Because somewhere out there, past the edge of what he can see from this window, a man with his blood in his veins and his grandmother's name, never far from his mouth, has been circling this restaurant for 2 months, watching it, learning it, working his way into the cracks Elias left open by staying away too long. 2 days till the anniversary. And now I know exactly who I have to find before it comes. The kitchen goes quiet behind him as the lunch prep starts up, pans water. The ordinary noise of a restaurant deciding to be a restaurant again. Elias doesn't join it yet. He walks instead toward the back hallway, past the walk-in, past the shelf of dry goods that still smells faintly of cornmeal. No matter how many times it's been wiped down, and waits by the door to the little office that used to be a broom closet before he made it something else. Corey comes first. Then Simone a few steps behind, arms still crossed, sunglasses still pushed up into her hair like armor she forgot to take off. He doesn't sit behind the desk. That would put a piece of furniture between them, and he doesn't want that. Today, wants them close enough to see his face, do whatever it's going to do, wants to see theirs too. I'm not doing this to punish you, he says. I want that clear before anything else gets said. Neither of them answers, which he expected. Simone. He looks at her first because she's the one standing furthest back, the one with her whole body angled toward the door, like she's already halfway gone. Yesterday in that kitchen, you said this place started going downhill the day it started letting anybody in. I need you to tell me what you meant by that. Not what sounds good right now, what you actually meant. She's quiet a second. Long enough that he almost fills the silence himself, almost rescues her from it. Old habit, the instinct to smooth things over before they get uncomfortable. He doesn't, lets it sit. I meant it's harder, she says finally. Flat. Not proud of it, but not backing down either. Training people who've never worked a register before. Covering for somebody who doesn't show up because they're dealing with a parole officer or a shelter curfew or whatever. It's not I don't hate anybody. I just work harder because of it, and nobody ever says thank you for that part. There it is. Not cruelty. Exhaustion wearing cruelty's clothes because nobody ever taught her a better outfit for it. Okay, he says, and means it not agreement, just acknowledgement that she said something true, even if it's an ugly kind of true. That's fair to feel. It's not fair to say it the way you said it in front of a stranger about people who've already spent enough of their life being talked about, like they're not in the room. You understand the difference. Her jaw works. Yeah. I built the hiring the way I built it because somebody did it for people who worked here before you were even old enough to carry a tray. Every person you've trained who came out of that program has shown up for a shift Otis needed covered. Twice. That's not me being soft. That's math. You just haven't been here long enough to see the math yet. She doesn't answer that. But something in her shoulders drops half an inch, and he takes it for what it is, not agreement, not yet. Just a door left open a crack instead of slammed. He turns to Corey. You don't need to say anything else about this morning. He says quieter now. You already told me what I needed to hear. I just want you to hear me say it back, so you know I'm not going to pretend I didn't. Corey nods. Doesn't trust his own voice from the look of him. Somebody found a crack in this place because I left it there, Elias says. That's on me before it's on either of you. But cracks don't stay small forever if nobody fills them. So here's where we're at. He pulls 2 folders from the desk drawer, plain, manila, nothing dramatic about them, which somehow makes them worse. Sets them side by side on the small table between them. One of these is for anybody who wants to stay. Real stay. Show up and mean it stay. He taps the second one. This one's for anybody who's done. No shame in it if that's the truth. Sign it, finish today's shift, walk out with 2 weeks' pay and a letter that doesn't say a word about today. I'd rather have people who choose this place than people who tolerate it. Neither of them reaches for either folder. He didn't expect them to. Not yet. You don't have to decide this second, he says. But by tonight, I will need an answer. Both of you. Simone looks at the folders like they might bite her. Corey looks at the floor. That's all, Elias says, and steps back, giving them the exit they both clearly want. Go on. We open in 10. They go. He watches them walk back toward the front of a house not together, exactly a few feet of careful distance between them, but moving in the same direction, which feels this morning like it might be worth something. He stays in the office a moment longer, hand resting flat on the closed door, listening to his own heartbeat settle. That was the easy part. He knows it even as he thinks. It knows how strange a sentence that is given how hard it just felt, because the hard part hasn't found him yet. The hard part has a name now. Has had a name since 8:22 this morning, sitting in a parked car at the edge of a lot, checking his phone. Working up the nerve to walk into a place he apparently used to think of as his. Elias pulls out his own phone, scrolls to his mother's name. Doesn't call yet, just looks at it the way you look at a door before you knock on it, gathering whatever it is you need to gather to survive whatever's on the other side. Then he calls. She picks up on the third ring voice, warm and unsuspecting, the particular voice of a woman who thinks this is just her son checking in. Well, hey baby, you never call this early. Mama. He hears his own voice catch on the word more than he means it to. I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually answer it, instead of changing the subject on me. A pause. Long enough that he can picture her exactly sitting down, slow, in whatever chair's closest the way she does, whenever a conversation announces itself as one of the important ones before a single real word's been said. Ask me, she says. Careful now. Cassius. Just the name. He lets it sit there in the space between them, the way it sat unspoken in every family gathering. He can remember every holiday where somebody's chair stayed a little too obviously empty, and nobody explained why. Who is he to us, actually? Not the version nobody ever finishes telling. The silence on the other end goes on so long he checks the screen to make sure the call didn't drop. Where'd you hear that name? She says finally. Her voice has changed, gone quiet in a way he's only heard a handful of times in his whole life. The register she used at the hospital near the end when the doctors started using words like comfortable instead of words that meant anything. Mama, He's your cousin. She says it like it costs her something. My sister Odell's boy. Older you by about 6 years. You wouldn't remember much of him. You were still real little the last time he sat at that table. What happened? Another pause. He can hear her breathing, hear something behind the breath that isn't quite words yet. Your grandmother took him in for a stretch, she says, finally. This was better than 20 years back now. He'd lost his job, lost his apartment right behind it. Wife left not long after that. And pride's a funny thing, baby. It'll have a grown man sleeping in his car before he'll ask his own family for help out loud. Your grandmother didn't wait for him to ask. Just showed up at his door one day and told him there was a room and a plate with his name already on it, whether he wanted it or not. Elias closes his eyes. Can see it exactly the version of Odessa who doesn't knock so much as arrive, who decides a thing needs fixing, and simply starts fixing it before anybody can argue. He stayed the better part of a year, his mother goes on, helped her out around the house, cooked with her some, actually. I remember that part, clear, the two of them in that kitchen, him learning her hands the way you'd learn a language. For a while there it looked like he was gonna land on his feet. What went wrong? She sighs. It's a sound he's heard from her before in other contexts, in other stories about other people. The sound of a woman about to admit her own family didn't behave as well as they like to remember. Money, she says simply. She'd been quiet about how much she was covering for him, his debts. Some of it not just room and board. I found out by accident, went at him about it at a family dinner in front of everybody. Said some things I've spent 20 years wishing I hadn't. Called him a grown man, taking advantage of an old woman's good heart. He didn't fight me on it. Just got real quiet and real still the way a person gets right before they leave for good instead of just for the night. And he left. That week, she says. Wouldn't answer her calls after. Wouldn't answer mine either, but I understood that part. I'd earned it. Elias sits with that a moment. Something in his chest twisting slow, because this isn't the story he braced for. Not a villain, not a schemer. Just a man who got humiliated by people who loved him and never found his way back from it. Mama. His voice comes out smaller than he wants it to. Did he come back? When she was sick. The silence this time is the longest one yet. We tried finding him, she says, and now there's something wet in her voice, 15 years old, and still fresh as yesterday. Your aunt tracked down a number, left messages. He never called back. And your grandmother Elias, she asked about him almost every day, near the end. Not accusing, just hoping. I hope somebody's feeding that boy, she used to say, staring at that window like he might just walk through it if she looked long enough. I hope he's eating. Wherever he's got to. The exact words. His own memory confirmed word for word by a woman 500 miles away who has no idea. He's been carrying that sentence around in his chest for 3 days like a stone he couldn't put down. He never came, Elias says. Not a question anymore. He never came, his mother echoes. And I have laid awake more nights than I'll ever tell you, wondering if that dinner table shouting is the reason why. Why do you ask me all this now, baby? What's going on? He almost tells her. Almost lets the whole thing spill out right there on the phone. The reviews, the box, Corey the alley, the 15 years of a name nobody would say out loud. But some instinct stops him, the same one that kept him quiet with Corey yesterday morning. This isn't hers to carry today. Not until he knows more himself. I think I found him, he says instead. Quiet. She doesn't answer right away. When she does, her voice has gone somewhere. Elias has only heard it go once or twice in his life. Somewhere between hope and terror, like she isn't sure yet which one she's allowed to feel. "Be careful with him," she says. "Whatever you're walking into. He was never a bad man, Elias. Just a proud one who got ashamed at exactly the wrong moment and never found his way out of it. Shame'll do that. Turn a good man and mean without him even noticing it happening." He tells her. He loves her. Hangs up before either of them can start crying over a phone line 500 miles apart, because there isn't time for that today, and because some griefs need saving for later, when there's room to actually feel them, instead of just carry them. Hein doesn't go home that evening. Doesn't even really decide not to, just finds himself once the last table's cleared, and the last chairs turned up onto the last table, and Otis has locked the walk-in for the night, still sitting in his car across the street. Same spot as 2 nights ago. Same sign buzzing faintly against a sky gone the color of a bruise just starting to heal. Evenings mostly, Otis said. After we close. Standing there looking up at that sign, like he's trying to remember something. So Elias waits, which feels insane if he lets himself think about it too directly. A grown man sitting alone in a parked car at dusk, hoping a stranger who is also his cousin might just wander by like weather. Except it isn't really a hope. It's closer to a certainty he can't explain, the kind that settles into your chest and just sits there, whether you invited it or not. 20 minutes pass. The restaurant lights click off one section at a time, the way they always do: kitchen, then dining room, then the neon, buzzing alone against a darkening street. Otis's truck pulls out. Then Naomi's car. Then Renee's headlights sweeping briefly across Elias's windshield, without either of them noticing him sitting there in the dark, waiting on a ghost. This is foolish, he thinks. He's not coming. 2 nights of a man standing on a sidewalk doesn't mean, except then a figure turns the corner down the block. Slow steps, hands in his pockets. Stopping the way, a person stops when they've walked this exact path enough times that their feet know it better than their head does. Elias's whole body goes still. The man stops across the street from the restaurant, tilts his head back, looks up at the sign the exact way Otis described it, not admiring it, not casing it, just looking at it the way you look at a photograph of somebody you miss. Elias gets out of the car. He doesn't call out, doesn't rush, just crosses the street, slow hands loose at his sides, the way you'd approach something wild that might startle and run if you moved too fast. The man sees him coming, goes rigid. Cassius. It's the first time either of them has said the other's name out loud, face to face, in what Elias now understands is closer to 30 years than 15, and something about hearing it happen, his own voice carrying his cousin's name across a quiet street, like it weighs nothing, when it's clearly weighed everything for a very long time, nearly buckles his knees. Cassius doesn't run. Elias half expected him to. Instead, he just stands there, jaw-tight eyes doing something complicated in the last of the daylight. You know who I am. Not a question. I do now, Elias says. Didn't this morning. A long silence. Cars pass on the street behind them. Somewhere a dog barks twice and goes quiet. I wasn't going to do anything, Cassius says finally, and there's something brittle in it, something already halfway to breaking. Wasn't going to come inside. Never have. Just like looking at it sometimes. That's all this is. Corey told me about the messages. Cassius's face does something fast and unguarded, caught, and knowing he's caught and hating both facts at once. He's a good kid, Cassius says quieter. Reminded me of myself a little. Somebody nobody bothers explaining anything to. I didn't tell him to do anything wrong. You asked him about the reviews. Cassius doesn't answer that, which is its own answer. Was that you? Elias says. Steady. Not a shout, though. Every part of him wants to raise his voice, wants this to be simpler than it is, wants an actual villain to be angry at instead of whatever complicated, wounded thing is standing in front of him right now. The reviews. The one about the box. Cassius looks away. Down the street at nothing. I wasn't trying to hurt the place. His voice cracks on the place, like even that phrase costs him something. I needed somebody to notice I existed near it. That's pathetic, I know how it sounds, saying it out loud. But you don't know what it's like watching somebody build something out of $200 and a busted-up smoker and turn it into this. He gestures at the building, the sign, all of it. When the last time you touched that woman's kitchen, you were the one she was trying to save. There it is. Cassius's story, arriving exactly the way Elias braced for it, the one he's told himself for 15 years, until it hardened into something like fact. She promised me there'd always be a place here, Cassius says, and his voice is shaking now. Not with anger, exactly with something closer to grief that never got to finish itself. Said it to me straight, sitting at that same table back before everything went sideways. And then she's gone, and you've got a whole restaurant with her name over the door, and I'm standing on a sidewalk, like some kind of stranger. Where's my place, Elias? Tell me that. Where'd it go? Elias doesn't answer right away. Because he could. He could tell him right now everything his mother told him 3 hours ago, the whole shape of it laid out clean. Some petty hurt part of him almost wants to watch that grievance crack the way it's about to crack, no matter what he says. He doesn't do it cruel, though. He does it gentle. As gentle as a true thing can be handed to somebody who's spent 15 years building a wall to keep it out. She didn't take that place away from you, Cassius. Don't. You walked away from it. His voice stays even though his own chest is pounding hard enough he can feel it in his throat. I talked to my mother tonight. I know about the money. I know about that dinner. I know she went at you in front of everybody, and it wasn't fair. And I know that's not something a person gets over easy. You don't know anything. I know she called you every week for 2 months after that, and you never picked up. His voice cracks now, too. Finally, the careful steadiness he's been holding on to all evening, giving out at last. I know she got sick 4 years after that, and the family found a number for you, and left messages, and you never called back. Not once. I know she asked about you almost every single day near the end. I hope he's eating, she used to say. I hope somebody's feeding that boy. Cassius makes a sound that isn't quite a word. Turns away from him, one hand coming up to cover his mouth, shoulders starting to shake in the particular way a man's shoulders shake when he's spent decades refusing to let this exact thing happen in front of another living soul. I was gonna call, he says, muffled, barely audible. Every week I told myself next week. Next week I'll be far enough along to call her and not sound like the man who got shouted at over money at her own table. And then there wasn't a next week left, and he can't finish it. Doesn't need to. Elias understands the rest well enough standing there in the dark with his own eyes stinging, because he's spent the last 3 days learning exactly how heavy that particular sentence gets once it's got nowhere left to go. She never stopped hoping you'd walk back through that door, Elias says. Quiet now, the anger gone of him, entirely replaced by something closer to the ache Otis described this morning, without either of them quite naming it. I didn't understand that till this week. Thought I understood everything about her. Turns out there was a whole room in that woman's heart I never even knew the door to. Cassius doesn't answer. Just stands there, one hand still over his mouth, staring at a sign with his grandmother's name on it that he hasn't let himself walk under in 15 years. Elias doesn't reach for him, doesn't offer a hug, doesn't offer forgiveness dressed up and tied with a bow, because that isn't his to hand out tonight. Not for a wound, this old not standing on a sidewalk in the dark, 3 days after learning his cousin's name, meant anything at all. "I'm not going to pretend this is fixed," he says instead. "It isn't. Might not be for a while yet. But I'm done pretending you don't exist if that's worth anything to you. She never did that. Least I can do is stop doing it too." Cassius doesn't look at him. Can't, maybe not yet. But he nods small, barely there, the kind of nod a man gives when a wall he's spent 15 years building has just taken its first real crack, and he isn't sure yet whether that feels like relief or like falling. "The reviews stop," Elias says. Not harsh, just true. Whatever this was, however it started, it stops tonight. "It's already stopped," Cassius says, voice raw. "Been stopped since about 4 this morning, if I'm honest. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that kid Corey and how I used him, same as everybody used me once. Didn't feel like getting even. Just felt like being the same kind of tired I've been for 15 years. Dressed up different." Neither of them says anything for a long moment. The sign buzzes overhead. Somewhere down the block, a car door slams ordinary sound in an evening that doesn't feel ordinary at all. 2 days, Elias says finally. Till the anniversary. Cassius's eyes come up at that. Something moves behind them, fear maybe, or the first thin edge of something that isn't fear. "I know," he says. "I've known the date every year. Just never known what to do with it, except stand out here and look at a sign." Elias doesn't answer that right away. Just looks at him. Really looks maybe for the first time all night past the guilt and the grievance and 15 years of silence to the shape of a man who is underneath all of it still family. Still blood, still somebody. Odessa never once stopped setting a plate for even after the plate went cold, even after the chair stayed empty year after year. "Go home, Cassius," he says finally. Not cold, just tired the way a person gets tired after carrying something heavy for exactly as long as they can carry it. "Get some sleep. This isn't a conversation that finishes tonight." He turns to walk back toward his car. Gets 3 steps before Cassius's voice stops him rough and small in the dark behind him. "Elias." He turns back. "Does she still have the sign?" Cassius asks. Odd question. Almost childlike coming out of a grown man's mouth. The little hand-painted one. Used to hang in the kitchen window. Everybody eats. You remember that one? Elias's throat closes around something he didn't expect. He does remember it vaguely. A flash from very early childhood. A piece of wood with uneven letters that disappeared sometime before he was old enough to ask where it went. "I don't know," he says honestly. "I'll look." Cassius nods. Doesn't say anything else. Just turns and walks back the way he came, hands in his pockets, shoulders, a little less braced than they were 20 minutes ago. Not healed, not close to it, but carrying something slightly lighter than the thing he walked in with. Elias watches him go until the dark swallows him at the corner. Then he stands there a long while alone on the sidewalk in front of a building with his grandmother's name on it, looking up at a sign that's buzzed the same amber and green for as long as he can remember. Everybody eats. He doesn't remember where that sign went, but he thinks standing there that he might know exactly where to start looking. The next morning, one day, until the anniversary. Now Elias hasn't slept right in 3 nights, and his body's stopped pretending it will. He's at the restaurant before 6, before the Cashiers fully committed to coming up, sitting in the dark dining room, with just the kitchen light bleeding in under the swinging door. 2 folders squared up neat on the table in front of him, like a hand of cards he already knows the outcome of. He hears Otis's truck before he sees it. Recognizes the particular rattle of that engine, the way you recognize a person's footsteps on stairs. Otis comes in through the side door keys, jangling, and stops short when he sees Elias already sitting there in the half-dark. "You didn't go home last night, did you?" "I went home. A beat. Didn't sleep much once I got there." Otis doesn't ask why not directly. Just crosses the dining room, pulls a chair around backward, and sits on it, the way he always has, arms folded over the top rail, like he's settling in for something. Which Elias understands he is. "You gonna tell me," Otis says, "or am I gonna have to guess my way there?" So Elias tells him. Not everything, not yet, not the part about his mother's voice cracking on the phone, not the exact shape of the guilt sitting in his own chest. About a cousin he never knew he was allowed to miss. But enough. The street. The sign. The name finally said out loud, between 2 men who've built something together out of nothing but stubbornness and a dead woman's recipes. Otis listens without interrupting once. That's a skill, Elias thinks. Watching him, the particular discipline of a man who's learned somewhere along a hard road exactly how loud his own opinions can get if he doesn't leash them on purpose. When Elias finishes, Otis is quiet a long moment, looking down at his own hands folded over the chair rail. "You know, I came up through a place not so different from where Corey's little friend has apparently been standing outside your restaurant feeling sorry for himself," he says finally. Dry, not cruel exactly, but not soft either. Halfway house. Court-ordered meetings twice a week. A caseworker who called me Mr. Otis, like that was supposed to make me feel like a man again, when what actually made me feel like a man was you handing me an apron and asking if I knew my way around a smoker. I remember. "You remember the part where I signed the paperwork," Otis says. "You don't remember the part where my hands were shaking so bad I signed my own name wrong the first time. Had to cross it out. Start over." Elias didn't know that part. Something in his chest tightens hearing it now, all these years later. Point is, Otis goes on, "I know what it costs a man to walk back into a place that's supposed to want him when every instinct he's got is telling him he's already been counted out. Your cousin's out there right now, fighting that same fight, except he's fighting it against a family instead of a parole board. That's harder, if you want my honest opinion. A parole board don't love you. Can't break your heart the way people who love you can." Elias sits with that. Feels it land somewhere true. "You think I should forgive him?" he says. Not quite a question. "I think that's not mine to tell you." Otis says. "I think what I know is this: every single person who ever gave me a real second chance, a whole one, no strings hanging off it, every one of them had to decide that on purpose more than once. Not just the first day, the 10th day, the 100th. Forgiveness ain't a door you open once and walk through. It's one you gotta keep choosing to leave unlocked." He stands, claps the chair back into place under the table, heads for the kitchen. Stops at the swinging door, one hand on it. "For what it's worth," he says, not turning around, "Miss Odessa gave me that kind of door. Kept it unlocked longer than I deserved some weeks. I wouldn't be standing in this kitchen if she hadn't. Whatever you decide about your cousin, just remember, you're not the only one in this building who owes that woman a debt like that." He disappears into the kitchen. Elias sits alone in the half-dark a while longer, the 2 folders still squared up in front of him, and lets that land the way it needs to. Simone comes to find him around noon, between the lunch rush and the afternoon lull, her folder already filled out and folded once in her back pocket. She doesn't say anything at first, just stands in the office doorway, arms crossed, the sunglasses that usually sit pushed up in her hair, nowhere in sight today. "I'm going," she says. No preamble. "Just so you know before you see the paper." Elias nods, slow. Doesn't argue. Doesn't try to talk her out of it, though. Some part of him, the part that hired her, that remembers her showing up for her interview in a blazer, clearly borrowed from somebody, trying so hard to look older than she was, wants to. "Can I ask why?" he says instead. Gentle. Not to change your mind, just to understand it. She sits down across from him, finally, in the chair Corey sat in 3 mornings ago. Picks at a loose thread on her sleeve for a second before she answers. "I think I was chasing a paycheck," she says. That's the honest answer. Not chasing, I don't know. Whatever it is you're chasing here. Otis has it. Renee has it. You can see it on them the way they move through a shift, like it means something past the hourly rate. She shakes her head. "I never had that. Not once. And standing in that meeting yesterday, hearing you talk about your grandmother, like she's still in the room, I just knew. That's not going to become true for me just because I want it to." "That's fair," Elias says, and means it. There's no version of this conversation where he pretends that's a failing on her part. Some people fit a place, and some people don't. And the not fitting isn't always a character flaw. Sometimes it's just an honest fact arriving late, but arriving true. "I'm sorry about what I said," she adds, quieter now, some of the armor cracking. "About the program. About people who I don't even fully believe what I said if I'm being real with you. I think I was just tired, and it was an easy thing to be mean about, because nobody in that kitchen was going to call me on it." "Somebody should have called you on it a long time before I walked in wearing a hoodie," Elias says. "That's on all of us, not just you." She almost smiles at that. Almost. "You handled today with more grace than I expected," he tells her, and stands. Comes around the desk, extends a hand instead of the hug some part of him wants to offer, because he can read the room well enough to know she'd rather keep this businesslike than let it get soft. 2 weeks' pay, like I said. And the letter's already written. You want to read it before I seal it?" "No," she says. "I trust you wrote something fair." She stands too. Pulls her uniform shirt off over the tank top underneath, folds it. Once sets it on the desk, like something she's setting down, after carrying it a long way. "For what it's worth," she says at the door, not quite looking back. "I hope it works out. Whatever this is you're trying to build back, I just don't think I'm the brick for it." She's gone before Elias can find the right thing to say back. He sits with the folded shirt on his desk, a long moment, something bittersweet, settling into his chest, not quite grief, not quite relief, some third thing that doesn't have a clean name. Corey finds him an hour later in the kitchen this time, elbow deep in a delivery of collards that needs sorting. He doesn't say anything at first, just grabs an apron off the hook and starts sorting greens alongside him, shoulder to shoulder, like he needs his hands busy before his mouth can catch up. "I'm staying," he says eventually to the greens more than to Elias. "Signed it this morning. Left it with Otis 'cause I chickened out of bringing it to you myself." "I got it," Elias says. "Otis handed it over an hour ago." Corey nods, keeps sorting. "I meant what I said," he says, "about earning it. I don't just want to say that and go back to how I was. I want I don't know. Something to actually do. Something that shows it instead of just tells it." Elias thinks about that for a second, wiping his hands on his apron. "Malik's coming in this afternoon," he says. "First shift on the register solo. You want a project, teach him, right. Not just the buttons. The part where you actually look at the person standing in front of you before you ring them up. Corey's jaw tightens, hearing his own recent history handed back to him like that. But he nods. Yeah, I can do that. I mean it, Corey. Not as punishment. As a real ask. You're good with people when you decide to be. I saw it your first week here before. He doesn't finish that sentence, doesn't need to. Before the shortcut started feeling easier than the real thing. Something in Corey's face shifts, not quite pride, not yet, but the early shape of it, the thing. Pride grows out of once a person starts believing they might actually be capable of the better version somebody's describing. Yes, sir, he says. And this time, it doesn't sound like a kid answering a boss. It sounds like a promise. Malik comes in at 2, right on schedule, backpack over one shoulder, and Elias watches from across the kitchen as Corey walks him through the register. Patient. This time. Actually. Patient pointing. Things out, laughing at something. Malik says the two of them settling into an easy rhythm that has nothing performative about it. A woman comes through the line a few minutes later, elderly, moving slow with a cane, and Elias watches Malik come around the counter without being asked to carry her tray to a booth by the window. Corey watches too. Says something to Malik when he comes back that makes the younger kid stand up a little straighter. Elias doesn't hear the words. Doesn't need to. He can read the shape of it well enough from across the room. That's it, that's exactly it. You just did the thing I'm trying to teach you. He goes back to his greens with something loosening in his chest for the first time in 4 days. That night at his own kitchen table, the tin box sits open in front of him. Again, the same as it did 2 nights ago, before any of this started. Cinnamon and dust, her handwriting slanting right across every card, always leaning toward the next word. He's not looking for anything in particular this time. Or he tells himself he isn't. But his fingers move slower through the cards than they did before, more careful. Like some part of him already suspects there's something in here. Here he missed the first few passes through. He finds it near the very bottom. Wedged flat against the tin, behind a card for tea cakes gone soft, at every corner from handling. A card he doesn't recognize at first, the recipe title reads Peach Hand Pies, and underneath in smaller writing a note he's never seen before, C's favorite. Always ate 3 before I could get a 4th in the oven. C. His whole body goes still. He turns the card over. The back is covered, edge to edge in her handwriting. Denser than any of the recipe cards written slower, like each word cost something to set down. No date. But he doesn't need one. He knows this hand, knows the particular unsteadiness that crept into her writing near the end, when her fingers had started their own quiet rebellion against her. Cassius, I made these the day you were born. Your mama brought you by wrapped in that yellow blanket, and I had flour on my hands, and didn't care one bit held you anyway. I've made them every year on your birthday since whether you were here to eat them or not. Some years I gave the extras to the church. Some years I just let them sit till they went stale and threw them out myself because a woman my age doesn't need 3 dozen hand pies going bad in her kitchen, but I couldn't stop making them either. Habits are just love that forgot how to introduce itself properly. I don't know where you are. I've stopped asking your mother because I can see what it does to her face when I do, and I won't be the reason she carries 2 griefs instead of 1. But I want you to know wherever this finds you, if it ever finds you at all. The door was never locked. Never once. You were the one who thought it was, and I understand why, and I forgive you for believing it, because shame is a liar that's very good at its job. Everybody eats, baby. That includes you. Especially you. Come home when you're ready. I'll have the oven on. Oh, Elias reads it 3 times before his vision clears enough to read it a 4th. He doesn't cry, not exactly. It's bigger than crying, something that moves through his whole chest, like weather, like the kind of rain that doesn't care whether you brought an umbrella. She never sent it. That's the part that breaks him hardest, sitting alone at his kitchen table at 11 at night. Not that she wrote it. That she couldn't. Didn't have an address. Didn't have a number that worked. Wrote a letter to a grandson she loved with her whole chest, and had nowhere on this earth to send it. So she tucked it behind a recipe card and kept baking pies. Nobody came to eat. I hope he's eating, wherever he's got to. Now he understands exactly what that sentence cost her, every single time she said it. He sits with the card a long time. Then carefully he sets it aside, not back in the box, not yet. Somewhere it can be found again tomorrow on purpose by the person it was always meant for. He calls his mother, even though it's late, even though he knows she keeps early hours now. She picks up on the second ring voice, thick with sleep, but instantly alert the way a mother's voice gets when her child calls after 10 at night. Baby, everything okay? I found something, he says. In her recipe box. A letter. To Cashiers. Silence on the line. Long enough that he can hear her breathing change. She never told me she wrote him anything, his mother says. Finally voice, unsteady. I don't think she wanted anybody carrying it but her, Elias says. Mama, do you know what happened to the little sign, the wooden one? Everybody eats. Used to hang in her kitchen window. Another pause, softer this time, like she's reaching backward through decades to find it. When we cleared the house out, she says slowly, there wasn't room in my place for half of what was in there. Sent a bunch of boxes to the restaurant back when you were first setting up. Figured you'd want them close, even if you didn't have time to go through them yet. I'd bet good money that sign's still sitting in one of them back in that storage room. Nobody ever cleans out. Elias closes his eyes. Of course it is. Of course it's been sitting there the whole time, 20 feet from where he stood 4 nights ago, in an alley listening to strangers call him a ghost in his own building. I'm gonna go find it, he says. Tonight. The storage room hasn't been properly gone through in years. Boxes stacked haphazard. A folding table, with a broken leg, leaned against one wall. The particular musty stillness of a space nobody visits on purpose. Elias finds the boxes marked in his mother's handwriting, near the back half buried under newer inventory. Nobody bothered to move around. It takes him 40 minutes, kneeling on a concrete floor at midnight, going through box after box of a dead woman's life. Church bulletins photographs gone soft at the edges, an apron still faintly smelling of something he can't quite place, sage maybe, or thyme, before his hand closes around something solid and flat wrapped in a dish towel gone stiff with age. He unwraps it slow. The paint's chipped at one corner. The letters are uneven, clearly hand-done by someone without much practice at lettering. Clearly done with love instead of skill. Everybody eats. He sits on the concrete floor, holding it for a long time, longer than he means to the whole building. Silent around him. Just him and a piece of painted wood, and every single thing it's been quietly waiting to mean again. The anniversary arrives gray and warm, the particular kind of southern morning that can't decide between rain and sun, and settles for something humid and undecided instead. Elias is at the restaurant by 7, though there's nothing urgent that needs doing. Yet the dinner isn't until 6 doors closed to regular business for the day. A hand-lettered sign in the front window announcing closed for a family matter in Renee's careful handwriting. He just needs to be inside these walls today. Needs to feel the building around him, the way you need to sit in a room that still smells like somebody, even after they're gone. By afternoon, the whole staff is there, unasked, unpaid, just showing up because it turns out that's what a place feels like when the culture's actually taken root again. Naomi's in the kitchen from noon 3 pots, going at once, humming something under her breath that might be church music. Renee's setting tables with a care that has nothing to do with any manager watching. Corey and Malik are stringing up string lights along the patio rail, laughing at something easy, in a way that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Otis hangs the little wooden sign himself right in the front window, beside the one that already spells out Odessa's table. Doesn't ask permission, just does it the way he does most things that matter, and steps back to look at it with his hands on his hips. Fits right, he says. To nobody in particular. To Odessa maybe wherever she's listening from. By 5:30, the room's filling, not just staff and family, but the community too. Word have spread quiet and fast the way it does in a neighborhood that's been fed by the same hands for years. An older man, Elias, half recognizes from 20 years of Sunday services. A young mother with 2 kids who used to come by on slow Tuesdays when money was tight, and Odessa never once made her feel it. Faces he knows, and faces he doesn't. All of them here because somewhere along the way, this building started meaning something to them too. His mother arrives at 6, having driven the whole way that morning, and the hug she gives him in the doorway lasts longer than either of them means it to. "You look like her when you're worried," she says into his shoulder. "Always have." "I need to tell you something before the night gets going," he says. "About the letter." They step aside into the quiet of the office, and he shows her the card. Watches her read it once, then again, her hand coming up to cover her mouth, the exact way Cashiers did on that sidewalk. 2 nights ago. The family resemblance in grief as clear as any resemblance in the face. "She never told me," his mother says, voice breaking. "All those years, and she never once told me she'd written to him." "I don't think it was ever about telling anybody," Elias says gently. "I think it was just about getting it out of her chest, somewhere it could sit." His mother wipes her eyes, hands the card back with a care that makes it look heavier than paper has any right to be. "If he comes tonight," she says, "I want to be the one who tells him she wrote it." "Can I do that?" "That's yours to do," Elias says. "I already carried it as far as I'm meant to." He sees Cashiers a little after 7 through the front window, standing across the street, exactly where he stood. 2 nights before, same posture, same hands jammed in his pockets, same unwillingness to close the last 20 feet between himself and a door he apparently still believes he isn't allowed through. Elias doesn't hesitate this time, doesn't sit in a parked car working up nerve. He walks straight out the front door into a street gone soft with early evening light and crosses toward his cousin, without a single word rehearsed. Cassius sees him coming and goes rigid half a step back like he might still bolt. "I wasn't gonna come in," he says fast before Elias even reaches him. Today's the day, and I couldn't not come stand somewhere close to it, even if, Cassius." He stops. "There's something I need to give you," Elias says. "And somebody inside who needs to give you something too. But it starts with you walking across this street. That part's on you. I can't do that part for you." Cassius looks past him toward the window, toward the little sign hanging in it now, for the first time in 15 years. Everybody eats chipped paint, and all exactly the way he remembered it, exactly the way he described it 2 nights ago, like a man describing a dream he wasn't sure was real. Something breaks open in his face seeing it. "That's found it last night," Elias says. "In storage. Right here the whole time if you want the honest, ridiculous truth of it. Cassius doesn't move for a long moment. Just stands there, staring at a piece of painted wood like it's speaking directly to him, which in every way that matters, it is. "I don't know how to walk in there," he says finally, voice cracking on it. 15 years of not walking in there. I don't know what my legs are supposed to do. "Same thing they've always done," Elias says. Gentle. "One in front of the other. I'll walk it with you if that helps." Cassius looks at him. Really looks the streetlight, catching something raw and unguarded in his face that Elias hasn't seen since that first night, and nods small, like a man agreeing to something bigger than the gesture suggests. They cross the street together. Slow. Elias doesn't reach for his arm, doesn't need to. Just stays beside him, matching his pace the way you'd walk beside someone recovering from an illness that mostly lives in places nobody else can see. The room goes quiet when they walk in. Not all at once, a ripple starting near the door and moving back through the crowd as people notice, as word passes low between tables. Elias's mother sees him first, goes still, one hand coming up to her mouth exactly the way it did in the office 20 minutes ago. She crosses the room without a word, stands in front of her nephew for a long moment, searching his face for something. "Cassius." Her voice breaks on it. "Lord, look at you, Aunt Ruth." His voice is barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I don't even know where to start with everything I'm sorry for." "Start with sitting down," she says, and there's nothing cold left in it. None of the sharpness Elias's mother described from that dinner table 20 years ago just, an old woman's sister standing in front of a boy. She's grieved without a body to grieve, finally getting to touch him again. "You can apologize all night if you want to, but you're gonna do it sitting down with a plate in front of you, because that's how this family does things. And you know it better than anybody. Your mama would have wanted to see you sitting at a table like this. Don't think I've forgotten that either." She pulls a card from her purse. The recipe card. The letter. The one thing in this whole building that's been waiting 15 years to finally reach its address. Presses it into his hands. "She wrote this for you," Ruth says. "Never got to send it. I think that's the only thing in this whole story. I'll never forgive myself for not making sure it found you sooner." Cassius reads it, standing in the middle of a room full of strangers and family, and whatever's left of his composure goes with it. He doesn't try to hide the crying. Doesn't apologize for it either. Not with words, just lets it happen right there, surrounded by people who for once in 15 years aren't looking away from him. Elias steps forward, pulls out the chair beside his own, an ordinary chair at an ordinary table. Nothing dramatic about the gesture except everything it's carrying. "Sit back," he says. "Everybody eats. You most of all tonight." Cassius sits, slow, unsteady, like a man testing whether the floor will actually hold him. It holds, and the dinner keeps moving around him, the way a river keeps moving around a stone that's finally stopped fighting the current. Naomi's cobbler disappears within the first hour, and she makes a second batch on the fly, laughing the whole time about how her own grandmother used to say the same thing about rushed batter, that apparently every grandmother in the South has said at some point. Otis tells stories about the early days, the rented backyard, the smoker held together with stubbornness and a prayer, and Cassius listens to every one of them, like a man trying to memorize a language he thought he'd forgotten. Somewhere in the middle of it, Elias notices a folded piece of paper tucked under the edge of a table near the window. A customer's handwriting unsigned. Been coming here off and on for years. Wasn't sure this place still had it in her, if you know what I mean. Tonight it did. Whoever she was, the one this place is named for. I think she's still in here somewhere. He reads it once, folds it careful, and slides it into his back pocket next to a recipe card that's traveled further tonight than it did in 15 years of sitting in a tin box. Cassius doesn't say much himself through most of it. Doesn't need to not tonight. Mostly he just eats a full plate, then a second one the way a man eats when he's spent longer than he'd like to admit forgetting what being fed by people who love you actually feels like. By the time the last guests trickle out, the signs still burning amber and green above the door. One bulb flickering in the corner the way it's flickered for years. A small imperfection. Elias has never once wanted fixed. Cassius lingers on the sidewalk a moment before he leaves, looking back up at it. And this time when he looks, something in his face has changed. Not healed, not all the way, not in one night. But lighter, like a man who's finally set something down. He's been carrying so long he forgot it had weight. Same time next week, Elias asks. Not pushing, just leaving the door open the way she always did. Cassius almost smiles. Yeah, he says, I think I'd like that. He walks off down the same street he's walked 100 times in the dark, alone, looking up at a sign, like it might tell him something. Except tonight, he's not looking up from across the street anymore. Tonight the door behind him is still unlocked, and for the first time in 15 years he knows it. Elias stands alone outside a while longer after everyone's gone, hand resting, flat against the brick, the way it did that very first night, back when all of this started with a stranger's laugh through a kitchen window. We're still Grandma, he says quiet to a street that isn't listening to a sign that's heard it before, and we'll hear it again. Took us long enough, but the whole garden's growing now, even the part I thought we'd lost for good. He looks up at the flickering bulb one more time. Doesn't call anybody to fix it.